Hi everybody, welcome back to another video. In today's video I'm going to be talking about storybook games. Now that might be a bit of a misnomer because it's not actually what you think what it is. Storybook games in board games are quite popular. I'm going to be giving you 3 examples that I personally own, although there may be some more. I'm pretty sure that there's some more out there. And I'm going to be focusing on one particular one out of the 3 that I have, but I will be mentioning them. So, a storybook game, what is it? Well, typically there's really 2 big aspects to it. The first aspect is storybook games are always campaign games. So you're playing through a story. It's not just one play, it's not 2 plays, it's usually multiple plays to play through a story. The second attribute or criteria for a storybook game, and this is the big one, which is why they call it a storybook game, is that it comes with a book that opens up that becomes your board. So storybook games don't come with boards per se, like your cardboard when you think of a board game that you undo and lay on the table and stuff like that. They don't come with that. They come with a book. And instead of playing on the board, you play on the book. So the 3 games that I have that I want to talk about that do this is one of them is called Comonauts, which I actually have not played, but I do have, and I have looked at it. It is a storybook game. The second one is a game that I have played all the way through the entire story called Stuffed Fables, which is great for kids because it's the theme is you take on stuffed animals that come awake during the night when the little girl goes to sleep. Your stuffed animal comes awake and you kind of fight off nightmare things to like protect your little girl and things like that. And the game has a lot of cool probing questions for kids at the end of each story, because every story has kind of a certain theme about fear or like fear of the unknown or when they're sad and things like that. So when you play with your kids at the end, there's some prompts that you can use in the book to kind of talk about what we just played, kind of theme of what we just played with your kids. That's super cool, but that's a storybook too. Another one that I have, and this is the one I'm going to be talking and showing, is called Near and Far. Near and Far is by a guy named Ryan Lockett, which I respect quite a bit because he writes his games, he designs his games, he does the artwork for his games, he does essentially everything for his games. And his games are hit and miss. I haven't played all of them, but I have played a good majority of Ryan Lockett games. There are some that I really, really enjoy. Near and Far, which I'm about to talk about in a minute, is probably my favorite game of his at the moment of recording this. He has some other games out there that kind of vary in how I like them. Islebound is one. Above and Below is another one that I didn't really care for as much. So Near and Far, let's give you some visual representation of what I'm talking about when we talk about these campaign/storybook games. So they come with a storybook, a pretty giant book here. And when you play, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to show off some of the artwork because Ryan Lockett has very distinct artwork. All of his games are in the same world, so they all kind of look the same. And so you open up the book and you end up with a map. And you will place your figures on parts of the map, and you will move around on the map. And so when you play, you're playing through this kind of story, part of the story, and it just, as a book kind of goes, you will then move to the next part I'm trying to keep my head in the shot, but whatever. You'll move through like the desert, kind of mountain areas. And as you get to certain spots, they correspond with certain events that you will read about. So you'll go to this old lady's hut, and then you'll read what the old lady has to say to you. Or, you'll have some kind of an encounter there. They're very, very cool looking with the artwork and things like that. I'm trying to find one that I really like that's got some water. Here's doing some aisle traveling. So again, this is a book. This is kind of a giant book that you lay out on the table like such, and you will be placing your characters, for the most part, on this and playing on the book. And you play through the whole book through the course of however many games. I believe this one, Near and Far, I've played through the entire campaign. I played through with a friend of mine. We played through all of them, and it was quite fun. And it took about 10 games, I want to say. So Storybook Games, let's talk about a narrative aspect. How we can do narratives in games, or how they're done, I guess I should say. When I started this channel, I really wanted to focus a lot on narrative and how narratives are used in games. Since then, I've kind of gone off and just done whatever I feel like, focusing on this game or play this, not that kind of things, which is all fine. I'm going to have a whole myriad of stuff on my channel, that's okay. But when I originally started, I really wanted the channel to be kind of focused on like, how do we see stories in games? Whether if it be direct stories that we interact with, whether if it be a choose your own adventure stories that we kind of interact with, option A, option B, or on a more abstract level, the stories that we have amongst us playing the game. Maybe the game doesn't provide a super thematic story, but we can always make the story between us and between your character. Not a lot of people tend to do that, especially not casual gamers. So for example, what I'm talking about is Monopoly. Monopoly does not have a big narrative to it. You roll, you move, auction, you set collect, it's trash, right? But you can kind of narrate your own story of the person that you're playing in that, and then I did this and sold this off and got lots of money, but then I went bankrupt because I drew a card and I got divorced. And so I ended up going bankrupt and had to sell this off. So yes, you could create a story of your Monopoly game. And so there's stories there too, just stories of us playing, things like that. So anyways, let's bring it back in. So let's talk about narratology, which is how stories are told. The devices, the tools, the ways that they're implemented in stories, or like written prose and movies, musicals, things like that. Well, let's talk about games. This right here is a tool for a story because as you probably already imagined, all the pages are laid out in a specific order that match the story. So as you go through the story, you're seriously like going through chapters, kind of like a book. So storybooks, as I said at the beginning, you might be thinking, oh, it's like a chapter book. Well, in a sense, it kind of is. It kind of is a chapter book. They call it a storybook game. And so this is one way of playing a game that implements a way of using a narrative. And how the narrative is told is through here, and again, like I said, through the encounters that you have in these spots on the board. There's another book that corresponds with this, so when you land on a spot, like spot 37, you open up the other book and you read 37 and you interact with the old lady that lives there, or whoever it be. And so that's another way of playing story, or having stories. As I've talked about time stories on my channel way back before, and I've talked about holding on, and those are other ways that they've implemented. Those are different styles of implementing narrative through a narratological lens of how the story is being told, like what kind of uses they're using to use the story. This is a third one that I haven't really touched on, which is called the Storybook Game. They're campaign games. So that's about all I really wanted to touch on. Again, I'm going to reiterate because I do love these games. Como Knots, Stuffed Fables is what it's called. I highly recommend it if you have kids, elementary school kids. And Near and Far is for adults if you've got adults that want to play through a story on this cool little book. Near and Far is a great recommendation for me. And so these are ways that we can find stories, that we can enjoy stories in our hobby, in our tabletop games. Anyways, that's going to be enough for me for today. So thanks for watching as always. I will see you at the next video.